Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kathy Lovett, and I'm with the Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division here at the Texas Education Agency. This is the second of two presentations that we're doing on this topic. Our previous training in November, we had a huge turnout for that training, as well as this training, so we were very pleased that there's a big interest in this topic. So our presenters today, besides myself, will be my unit's project lead for this project, and that's Saida Jaregna, also Ashley Rubio, and Tricia Murray. Saida yesterday should have emailed all of the participants the PowerPoint slide so that if you want to take notes, you should have that. And then we also have posted the PowerPoint on the Indirect Cost Rate website. So we'll get started now. This training today is about the district's request for indirect cost rates for the 21-22 school year. We'll be talking about the indirect cost rate proposal, additional cost workbook, and the certification, and information about completing the ICRP ACW and certifying the ICRP. So thank you again for joining us. This next slide is our standard disclaimer. We just want to let you know that this reflects the current understanding of the indirect cost rate proposal process, the requirements and applicable federal guidance. And keep in mind that the contents of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance presented by federal agencies with regulatory oversight over indirect costs. And keep in mind also that this presentation does not constitute legal advice, and so LEAs are always advised to seek legal counsel regarding any particular legal matters. Because we had such a huge number of registrants, we made this into a webinar as opposed to a meeting, so all of you are automatically muted. Please submit any questions that you have in the Q&A link, and then we'll address those at the end. We'll go through the entire presentation and address those at the end. Tricia's going to be manning our Q&A process, so if you have a question and she has the answer, she'll be responding immediately. Also, if you have any technical issues, let us know in the chat feature. So our agenda today will cover all of these topics and probably more. We'll be talking about the role of the United States Department of Education, or USDE. We'll be giving an overview of the ICRP and the ICRP ACW. We'll give a concise timeline that'll be a useful resource. We'll talk about completing the ICRP ACW and submitting the ICRP ACW. We'll talk about ICRP next steps. And we'll, at the end, go into reviewing and certifying the ICRP. So we want to start off by showing you the indirect cost rate webpage. There are numerous resources located here. What you see here, the snippet, is actually the middle of the page. At the top of the page, there's some information about the different types of indirect cost rates, etc. This is the part that we're going to be going over today, the additional cost workbook. There's an Excel version and a PDF version there for you, for your use. There's also an instruction manual and a frequently asked questions document. And then there's a copy of this PowerPoint training module, both in PowerPoint form and in PDF format. So, so these are the resources that we'll be focusing in on today. However, at the bottom of this page, you'll see at the bottom of this slide, it says submission deadline. Of course, we'll be talking about that later. The submission deadline is January 19th, 2021. At the bottom of the page, there's also information about the certification instructions. There's also current and prior year indirect cost rates for all school districts, charter schools, and education service centers. There's also archive rates that can be found in charts that go all the way back to 2013. So there's a lot of good resources here. There's also a link to the TEA correspondence that we sent out on November 5th, 2020. That's the letter that summarized the indirect cost rate process. So this is a good resource for you to know about and check out because everything we're talking about here today can be found on this webpage. So we'll talk a little bit about the USDE methodology. The indirect cost rate calculation methodology is dictated by federal laws and the USDE. So the USDE designates TEA as the cognizant agency for indirect costs and authorizes TEA to issue indirect costs to independent school districts, open enrollment charter schools, education service centers, and also other governmental agencies and that are educational in nature. And some examples of this are Wyndham Schools, Texas Juvenile Justice Department, and Harris County Department of Ed. So TEA serves as the cognizant agency for all of these entities. The USDE TEA delegation agreement is the agreement that dictates how we calculate rates. And that delegation agreement actually changed in 1819, but our newest delegation agreement was renewed last November, and it's in effect for 5 years. So our current agreement with USDE and approval of our process will be in effect through school year or through the year 2024, 2025. So what the U.S. delegation agreement does is it, as I said, it dictates the way dictates and approves how we calculate indirect cost rates. So for school year 2021 and beyond, this new 5-year delegation agreement specifies that approved indirect cost rate methodology, and in that methodology, it reaffirmed and clarified our current procedures in what's called the LEA plan. It prohibited indirect cost rate extensions. It rescinded any current indirect cost rate extensions. It required that rates be requested by school districts every year. It also required that TEA calculates rates every year. And it required 3 years of financial data to calculate the 1-year rates. So for the 3 years of financial data that are used to calculate the 2021, 2022 school year or fiscal year 2022, we'll be using financial data from 2017-18, 2018-19, and 2019-20. TEA issues 2 types of rates, an unrestricted rate and a restricted rate, and the one used is usually determined by the supplement, not supplant provision. Unrestricted rates, let me go back to the supplement, not supplant provision means that grant funds must be used only to enhance and support existing state or locally funded activities. The grant funds must not be used to replace state or locally funded activities. So the unrestricted rates are applied to grants that are not subject to the federal supplement, not supplant provision. And then the restricted rates are rates used for grant programs where the supplement, not supplant requirement does apply. So most of the grants that TEA administers are federal grants, and most of those are subject to the supplement, not supplant requirement. And in that case, the restricted indirect cost rate is applied to those particular grants. So going into what the indirect cost rate proposal will include. In the past, districts would complete the indirect cost rate proposal themselves. However, when the change was made to include 3 years of data, the indirect cost rate proposal was updated to accommodate 3 years of financial data. However, districts no longer complete the actual ICRP. Instead, they complete what we're calling the ICRP Additional Costs Workbook, or the ICRP ACW. Because of the size, amount, and complexity of data required by the ICRP, and because it was amped up to have to include 3 years of data, TEA developed a data calculation methodology that utilizes PIEMS data. However, a small amount of data, of the required data, cannot be obtained through PIEMS. Therefore, districts are asked to provide this small amount of additional cost data to TEA via the ACW. Districts can easily obtain these additional cost data by running simple queries within their financial accounting systems. Districts will not be required to analyze or classify any costs. And a little bit later, Saida will be talking to you about some sample queries that you'll be able to run. Because districts are required to request rates, and because TEA needs a small amount of additional cost information for the ICRP, the procedure was changed so that districts request indirect cost rates for 21-22 through the submission of the additional cost workbook. So TEA then does the next step of pre-populating an ICRP for each district that requests indirect cost rates through submission of the ICRP ACW. Last year, the 2021 ICRP was streamlined. I'm sorry, the 2021 ICRP was streamlined. And so this next year's ICRP, the 21-22 school year, it follows the same format. Districts, as I said before, districts must complete and submit the ACW to request indirect cost rates. And we're stressing this because submission is the cue to FFCR that you want a rate calculated for your LEA. This submission of the ACW serves as a district's official request for indirect cost rates. If a completed ACW is not submitted by a district, TEA will not calculate or issue rates for that district for the upcoming school year. So to receive rates for the 21-22 school year, the due date to submit the ICRP ACW is January 19th, 2021. And then once this ACW is submitted and we receive it, TEA will merge this data with the PIEMS data to produce the ICRP, which then is made available to districts. And the final step is ICRP certification. So the ICRP will be pre-populated by two different data sets. So for every LEA that submits the ACW, TEA will pre-populate the ICRP. And keep in mind that these percentages are approximate. 10% of the data will come from your additional cost workbook or the ACW, and 90% will come from PIEMS data that we pull directly from PIEMS. Just a clarification, TEA is requesting this additional data via the ACW because that data is required for the indirect cost rate calculation and cannot be obtained through the PIEMS system. Most of the expenditure data submitted in the ICRP ACW are for costs that are considered excluded costs in the indirect cost rate calculation. These costs actually distort the expenditure base. So leaving these out of the calculation would cause the resulting rates to be much lower than they actually should be. So it's really important that you take great care in completing the ACW and submitting accurate data, because it ensures that your rate will be more accurate. Once the data is merged into an ICRP, then districts have this one final action item required where they review and certify the completed ICRPs. So here we've summarized the steps in a timeline format. On November the 5th, 2020, the ICRP ACW was made available via the indirect cost rate webpage and through GFFC reports and data collections accessible through TEAL. The due date for districts to submit the ICRP ACW telling us you want a rate is January the 19th, 2021. So our team then, in January through April, we review all the submitted ACWs, and if necessary, we request clarification and or resubmissions. Once all of those ACWs are reviewed and finalized and approved by our team, the The division then takes that data and merges it with the ICRP data, merges it with the PEMS data to create the ICRP. And those ICRPs will be available to districts by April the 22nd, 2021. Districts then have about a month to review that ICRP and certify it in GFFC reports and data collections. This is a very important step. This is the second step for the districts. The first step, of course, is submission of the ACW. Then TEA takes over and creates the ICRP and then provides it back to the districts. And then the districts have to take that final step to do that certification of the actual ICRP in GFFC reports and data collections. And that's due May 21st. And then our division then will create notification letters and upload those in GFFC reports and data collections. And those rates become effective as of July 1, 2021. So now Saida, I'm going to turn it over to Sina, pass the baton, and she'll walk you through the steps of actually completing the ICRP additional costs workbook.
Thank you, Kathy. So in the next few slides, we're gonna actually look at each tab of the ACW and look at some examples of queries and what the information is required to complete the ACW. So this is the first tab, which is the LDA information and certification of additional costs. So here you need to enter the following information for the ISD to certify that all submitted data is true and accurate. So you'll need to select the ISD name in the pull-down field. And once you do that, the county district number or the CDN will populate. And going forward, name of the LDA and CDN number will populate to the header of each of the worksheet. So the other information required here is the name of the primary contact. So this would be the person completing the worksheet. And this will be the person that we're going to contact if we need clarification or have any question regarding district's ACW. And the title of that person, the phone number, email, and date of completion and submission. Next, we have checklist to assist LDAs. So this is a new tab we added to assist LDAs. It highlights all the tabs and sections of the ACW that need to be completed by LEAs before they submit their workbook back to us, back to TEA. Our hope is it will answer and clarify some of the questions LEAs might have when completing the workbook. It's a great resource. We did include a link to our webpage and also a link to a frequently asked question in this tab. And like I mentioned, it has a little description of what is being required in every section, please. So we highly encourage you, please check it out. We will not be reviewing it, but it's there to assist you to complete the ACW. This is the organizational chart sample worksheet. This is a tab that contains an example of the kind of organizational chart that districts must submit for fiscal year 2020. It is similar to the previous year, and this tab still stays there, and it's just a sample tab. The next tab, the organizational chart worksheet, is where you'll be inserting your district's org chart. So like I mentioned, the process for submitting the org chart is the same as last year. Districts can insert their org chart into this worksheet, and how to insert the org chart is found within the highlighted section in the tab. Districts will not submit a separate document in GFFC reports and data collection. That is not required. We would like to see your org chart right within the workbook. And the workbook, the org chart must support the Chief Executive Officer information on the additional cost fiscal year 20 tab. Therefore, this year, LEAs need to submit fiscal year 2020 or school year 2019-2020 org chart in this tab. The additional cost worksheet. Like Kathy mentioned, the 2018-2019 school year was the first year TEA implemented the required 3 years of financial data to calculate the 1-year rates. If your district requested rate, since the new process has been implemented, you would have seen the 3 additional cost worksheet, one for each fiscal year, required to be included in the ICRP during your ICRP review process. If your district received indirect cost rates for 2021 school year and is requesting again for 21-22 school year, you'll only have to submit one additional cost worksheet for fiscal year 20 or 19-20 school year data, because we have retained the data you already submitted for the previous 2 years of 17-18 and 18-19. If your district did not receive rates for 2021 school year, then you'll have to submit 3 years worth of additional cost data for fiscal year 18, 19, and 20. And for whichever year state does not have data for your district. If that is the case, you'll need to reach out, email us and let us know, and then we'll provide you with the required three-year workbook. Please note when you're completing the ACW that the fiscal year noted in the heading of the worksheet matches the data that you'll be entering into the workbook. Like I mentioned in the previous slide, the first year is the only year districts are required to submit 3 years worth of data. In subsequent years, the district will be required to provide data only for the years not previously submitted. So districts should run accounting system queries to retrieve most of the requested information. In a few slides, we'll be looking at examples of what kind of accounting system queries that you'll need to run to complete the workbook. We recommend that a staff member familiar with the accounting system queries should complete the workbook. Like Kathy mentioned earlier, no cost analysis or classification of cost is required by the district. Leaving a section blank or incomplete could result in the delay of the district receiving indirect cost rates due to incomplete information. If there are no costs to report in a section, please go ahead and indicate a 0 as the expenditure amount. Next, we'll be looking at some of the types of queries that you need to run. And function 41, general governance and direct costs. So this is the first section. In this section, enter the expenditure for org codes 702, 703, and 720 by function, by fund, function, and object code as requested here in the worksheet. Except for excluded cost and org 720 direct costs, expenditure within function 41 are treated as indirect costs for the indirect cost rate calculation. When calculating indirect cost rates, expenditure within function 41 are treated as follows. So org 702 school board is excluded cost, org 703 tax office is excluded cost, and then org 720 direct cost is treated as direct cost. So I'll go ahead and give you 2 examples of simple queries to run in this section to get the information that you'll need. The first example will be for line item 1, fund 100, function 41, object 6100 for 702 school board. 2 queries are needed: query expenditure for fund 100, function 41, object 6100, org 702, and also fund 100, function 41, object 6144, org 702. From the resulting amount, you deduct the object 6144 total from the object 6100 total and report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. The next example will be for line item 2, fund 100, function 41, object 6200 for 703 tax office. In this instant, only 1 query is needed: the query expenditure for fund 100, function 41, object 6200 for org 703. Then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Next section is the TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments. Here again, enter the expenditure for all TRS on behalf payments and or Medicare Part D payments made during the applicable fiscal year by the appropriate fund, function, and object code as requested in the worksheet. These payments are considered excluded in the indirect cost rate calculation. An example query here will be for line item. Here also I'll use line item 1, which is going to be for Fund 100, Object 6144 for Function 1X. One query is needed. The query expenditure for Fund 100, Function 1X, Object 6144, and then report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Food and milk cost of food service program. Enter all food and milk expenditures in a food service program made during the applicable fiscal year by the appropriate fund, function, and object code as requested in the worksheet. If your district has food and milk costs coded to Fund 700, you will enter the amount under Food Service Enterprise Fund, like the last line item that you see there. An example query to run for this section would be for line item 1, Fund 100, Object 6341 for Function 3X. One query is needed. The query expenditure for Fund 100, Function 3X, Object 6341. Then you report the amount in the corresponding line item cell. Expenditures for food and milk in food service program are also considered excluded costs. Next, we have depreciation expense amount. Enter the total depreciation expense charged to governmental activities for buildings, improvements, and furniture, equipment, vehicles. Depreciation expense is one critical expense to report and is required to report. Everybody needs to report a depreciation expense amount. Under or over reporting the depreciation amounts can and will distort the indirect cost rates considerably. So we ask that you pay particular attention here over at this section, because like I said, under or over reporting the depreciation amounts will distort the indirect cost rates. The district must enter the depreciation amount for the total cost for both building improvements and furniture, equipment, vehicles, and that amount cannot exceed the net depreciation amount listed for assets as reported in the notes to the financial statement section. The information needed to complete the depreciation expense amounts can be found in the notes to the financial statement section of your district's AFR or the annual financial report under capital assets or capital assets activity. Here we have an example of the capital asset activity from a sample districts and how the costs are broken down and reported. Determine the increase for buildings and improvements and capital lease if applicable and itemize. Then you determine the increase for furniture, equipment, and vehicles. Ensure that the total increase are equal to the amount of depreciation charged to governmental activities. You review the expense charged to governmental activities and note any charge to federal funds. Remove any federal funds, and then you report the rest in this section. Payments to fiscal agent and or member district of shared service arrangements or SSAs, where districts are only required to report federal funds. Answer yes or no to the question, did the LEA make payments to a fiscal agent and or member district of an SSA funded with federal grant funds from Function 93? Please note that the question is asking about payments made from federal grant funds. Many districts are participating in a non-federally funded SSAs. If your answer is no, then you proceed to the next section as no further data entries are required. If your answer is yes, complete the section by providing the requested details on any payments made to fiscal agent and or member districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. The best query to gather this data is a query of payment history for function 93, object 64, 9X. This report will provide the SSA's payments by fund, and then you itemize the payments in the worksheet based on the funding source. It's very important to include the CFDA number, as this number confirms that the payment was made with federal funds. If there is no CFDA number, then the payment was not likely made from federal funds and should not be reported here. Payments to fiscal agent and or member districts of an SSA are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment, which is counted as direct cost. Although you'll input the total amount of the SSA payments, the final ICRP will calculate as direct cost only the first $25,000 of each of the payments, and the remainder of each payment will be considered excluded. So you're gonna enter here for the full amount of expenditure. Next, we have the federal subrecipient items, federal subgrants and federal grant pass-through funds. A subrecipient item is the disbursement of federal grant funds by the district to another entity to carry out a portion or all of a federal grant program. A subrecipient, or the payee, is the entity to which you distribute funds in a subgrant. One of the most common questions we get on this section is what's the difference between subgrants and the pass-through funds? The federal subrecipient section is used if your district issued a subgrant for food service program and or other pass-through funds, funds given to other entities that are not fiscal agents or member districts of an SSA. Again, I would like to highlight here that for the purpose of the ICRP ACW, we have separated payments to fiscal agent SSAs from other federal subrecipient items to define cost. Here again, there is a little question and you need to answer yes or no to the question. Did the school district distribute federal grant funds as a subgrant or as a federal grant pass-through funds? If your answer is no, then you proceed to the next section as no further data entry is required. Most districts will answer no to this question. If the answer is yes, complete the section by providing the requested details on the subrecipient items. So you need to enter all federal subgrants and or other federal grant pass-through funds by selecting the fund, function, and object codes under which the payment was made, and then enter the payee name, description of the subrecipient item, the CFDA number, the beginning and end dates, and finally the amount. Here again, if it is important to include the CFDA number, as the number confirms that the payment was made with federal funds. If there is no CFDA number, then the payment was not likely made from federal funds and should not be reported here. For the purpose of the ICRP, TEA is only concerned with major subgrants and has adopted the accepted definition that a major subgrant is one that exceeds $25,000 in expenditure per year. For this reason, do not include subgrants or subcontracts that are less than $25,000 and do not include the first $25,000 of a payment in subgrants or subcontracts that are greater than $25,000. Districts will not have subgrants or grant pass-through funds on educational grants. However, districts may have subgrants or grant pass-through funds on non-educational grants awarded by another agency. TA is not expecting to see items entered in this section, but like I mentioned, unless, I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this slide, unless a district has issued a subgrant for their food service program, in that case, this is the section where you'll enter that amount. Federal subrecipient items are considered excluded cost in the indirect cost rate calculation, except for the first $25,000 of each payment for a major subgrant, like I mentioned, which means greater than $25,000. So the first $25,000 of a major subgrant will be considered as direct cost, in the calculation because these funds still have direct and administrative costs associated with them. Next, we have contingencies. These are funds set aside for possible future expenses, such as lawsuits, lawsuit settlements, or refunds to TEA. An example we gave here is a monetary judgment against the district or school. And these costs are excluded costs in the indirect cost rate calculation. That's why they are included in the workbook. Here again, you need to select the fund, function, and object code from the pull-down list, and also enter a description and the amount of the contingency. Chief Executive Officer information. Enter all expenditures for Chief Executive Officers and their immediate support person, state and local salaries, and fixed costs by function and position name. These positions should correspond to the organizational chart that you'll be inserting and pasting within the ICRP ACW org chart tab that we looked at earlier. TA will review and verify that the org chart supports the position, titles, and details entered in this section. In this section, the district enters costs related to the superintendent and chief executive officer within the school. The cost, facilities, and administrative associated with these positions are indirect costs when paid with state and local funds. However, when calculating the restricted indirect cost, these costs must be moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost, or what we call the base. And the modified total direct cost actually consists of direct and unallowable costs. So the positions that must be reported in this section include the superintendent, the immediate employee who serves as the executive or administrative assistant to the superintendent, all staff members who act as CEOs of any component of the district, regardless of their actual titles. These include members of your district-wide strategic planning and or executive management team or superintendent's cabinet. What a component is an organizational unit that benefits the entire district. On a district's organizational chart, CEOs are generally one level below the superintendent, although in larger districts, CEOs may be 2 levels below the superintendent, and they generally hold job titles such as assistant superintendent, deputy superintendent, chief financial officer, and human resource executive director. And of course, you'll also need to include the immediate employee or employees who serve as the executive administrative assistant to these CEO positions. For each position, enter the following information. Select the function codes from which the indirect salary, fixed costs are paid from the pull-down list, the position title, the salary amount paid from state and local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state and local funds, and the staff count for the position. If the position is funded from multiple functions, you enter multiple line items for the position and then enter only one on one line item under staff count. That will be the number of positions. The indirect or the facility and administrative costs associated with this position include the following. So what are these costs? These are salaries classified as indirect costs for the unrestricted rate and fixed costs classified as indirect costs for the unrestricted rate. So what fixed costs are? The cost your district pays for fringe benefits and similar costs associated with employment. Some of the examples that we have is employee retirement matching, pension fund payments, unemployment compensation, or unused leave for separating employees. Next, we have terminal leave. Terminal leave is leave paid to departing employees outside of the normal routine payments for either the accumulation of vacation leave or as part of unemployment contract. Answer yes or no to the question, did the LA make payments to one or more departing employees for terminal leave? If your answer is no, the section is complete and no further data entry is required. If the answer is yes, then you complete the section by providing the requested expenditure for each employee by providing the fund, function, and object from which the payment was made, and the location, job title, and name of the employee. Also, you selected from the pull down the direct or indirect nature of the employee, and finally, you'll enter the amount. Most districts do not have terminal leave because most do not provide formal vacation leave. So we usually do not see an amount entered here. This is the last section of the ACW. We will go ahead and take a quick 5 minutes break. And when we come back, Ashley will be talking to us about some of the common errors that we came across in reviewing ACWs, and also how to submit the ACW, and also what the next steps are. Thank you. I will be back. We'll meet again at 9:50.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started back up here. So here for the next few slides, we will discuss some areas of opportunity to focus on when completing the following sections. I will also be providing you some reminders, a brief description of what needs to belong in these particular sections. Our team has identified under depreciation expenses, amounts were either left blank or the amount was not completely correct. So we do want to make you aware that it is very important to report an expense to prevent resubmission or information which may delay processing times. And if the amount is under or over reported, the depreciation amounts can distort the indirect cost rates considerably. Therefore, as a reminder, to complete this section, you will want to enter the total depreciation charged to governmental funds, which includes expense amounts charged to governmental activities for both buildings, improvements, and furniture, equipment, and vehicles. The next section under payments to fiscal agent and/or member district of shared services, SSAs, incomplete data has been reported in this section. It is important to select an answer from the pull-down list where you will select yes or no to the question, did the LEA make payments to a fiscal agent and/or a member district of an SSA with federal grant funds from Function 93? Keep in mind that this question is asking about payments from federal grant funds. Therefore, if you select no, this section will be complete. And if yes, you will enter all payments made to fiscal agents and/or member districts of an SSA for federally funded SSAs. You will enter the name of the SSA, include the CFDA number, begin and end date, and the amount. Some more areas of opportunity to focus on are under the federal subrecipient items. We have identified incomplete data and no selection from the pull-down list. From the pull-down list located on the right-hand side of the data sheet, select yes or no to the question, did the school district distribute federal grant funds as a subgrant or as a federal grant pass-through fund? Again, if the selection is no, you will have completed this section and you can move forward into the next section. If yes, you'll complete the section by providing the requested details on the subrecipient items, including the fund, function, and object codes under which the payment was made, enter the payee name, a description of the subrecipient item, the CFDA number, begin and end date, and the amount. The next section under contingencies, an area to focus is to ensure a selection is made from all the pull-down list. You will select the fund, function, and object code from the pull-down list and enter all expenditures for any contingencies the district has within its total governmental expenditures. Last but not least, under Chief Executive Officer information. Common areas of opportunity include no selection from the pull-down list, number of positions were not included, and positions that should not be listed were reported. When completing this section, keep in mind to select the function code from the pull-down list, the position title, the salary amount paid from state and/or local funds, the fixed cost amount paid from state local funds, the staff count for the position. We have included some examples of positions that should not be listed under the CEO section, which includes positions which oversee a campus or focus population. Those are not considered CEOs. So for example, campus principals, special education programs, federal programs, transportation programs, food service programs, art programs, board of trustees. You may also view more examples of positions that should not be under this section which can be found in the FAQ document on pages 10 and 11. It is important to complete the entirety of the additional cost workbook with true and accurate data. Therefore, as mentioned above, Saida did show you a checklist that she made great, and it's very good to use as a guide and a tool just to ensure that these sections are completed correctly. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and move forward and discuss how to submit the ICRP ACW. So first, we'll go ahead and ensure that you're logged on to the TEA login, also known as TEAL. You're going to select GFFC reports and data collections. Select upload response documents. Select the ICRP additional cost workbook from the response template title pull-down menu. Please note that the workbook must be submitted in Excel format. And once that has been completed, you'll then select response document from the response doc type pull-down menu. You're going to select the school year for which you're requesting the indirect cost rate from the school year pull-down menu. So therefore, if you're submitting in the fall of 2020 or spring of 2021, you'll then select 2021-2022 school year. And then at that point, you'll go ahead and select upload document. Okay, so what are the next steps? To receive an indirect cost rate for 2021-2022, districts must submit the ICRP ACW by January 19th, 2021. TEA's Federal Fiscal Compliance and Reporting Division will then collect final 2019-2020 PEIMS data in the spring of 2021 to complete the data needed to create an ICRP. TEA will then merge the district submitted ICRP ACW data with PEIMS to create and pre-populate and complete the ICRP. TEA will then post the complete ICRPs and GFFC reports for the district's review. Districts will be required to review and certify acceptance of the resulting indirect cost rates. Then finally, the new rates will become effective July 1st of 2021. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Saida. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Ashley. In the next few slides, we're going to look at some pages from the ICRP, the completed ICRP, and which is the financial worksheet, and we're going to also discuss the difference between the ACW certification and the ICRP certification, and how to submit the ICRP certification. So this is, when first generated, the ICRP is an Excel form, which will be converted into a PDF, and that is what will be uploaded to districts on GFFC reports. When reviewing the ICRP, you'll notice that the pages are labeled on the bottom of each page. The U1O pages will be found on pages 2 to 3, and what that is a summary of the unrestricted rates data average for all 3 years. Next, you will find the R1O years, which is on pages 5 to 6, and this is a summary of the restricted rates data average for all 3 years. The restricted rate adjustment all. This page will show the average for all 3 years of indirect cost rate adjustment. These are the costs that are moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct costs. On the U1 ISD expenditures are classified as either excluded, an allowable direct, or direct cost based on fund, function, and object. Costs that are classified as indirect costs on the U1 tab used for the unrestricted rate calculation then are adjusted to determine the restricted rate. And this section 4 of this page will provide the average amount that is moved from the indirect cost pool to the modified total direct cost on the restricted rate calculation tab. Under each section, there's a little bit of a description of exactly what you'll be reviewing when reviewing this page. The following pages contain supporting data for each of the 3 fiscal years and show the average data elements which were used to produce the resulting rates. And the way it's organized is first we have the ACW that we receive from the districts, followed by the PIMS financial data. So for year 1 or fiscal year 2018, those are found on pages 7 to 10. Then for fiscal year 2019 or year 2, they are found on pages 11 to 14. And finally, we have year 3 or fiscal year 2020, which are found on pages 15 to 18. And it is, like I said, a PDF format, and there are 18 pages. And the first page of the ICRP is your ICRP certification. The ACW certification, like I mentioned earlier, will certify that all submitted data is true and accurate and has the contact information of the person completing the workbook. And the person will contact if we need extra information or clarification or resubmission of the ACW. The ICRP certification, on the other hand, is district certification of the information that is contained within the proposal. Like I mentioned, it is the first page of the ICRP. To accept and finalize your district rates, this certification of indirect costs must be completed, signed, and submitted back to TEA. The certification must be signed by the school district superintendent, chief executive officer, or chief financial officer. And certification must be for the correct school year. So which is 2021, 2022 for the next cycle. Submission of this ICRP certification is the district's last step to be issued indirect cost rates for 2021, 2022. And to complete the certification, these are the steps. You print the certification page, and we only need that one, the first page, the certification page, to be printed, and then you enter the required information. You have the superintendent, CEO, or CFO sign and date the printed page, scan the signed and dated page, and then you upload the scanned certification into GFFC reports as ICRP certification. And the steps to submit the ICRP certification into GFFC reports and data collection is you log on to TEA login or TIL, you select GFFC reports and data collections, then upload response documents, select ICRP certification from the response template title or pull-down menu, select response document from the response doc type or pull-down menu, select the school year, which is 2021, 2022 from the school year pull-down menu, and then select upload document. It is very important that you index all of the documents that you submit on GFFC reports correctly. So in this case, it's very important that you index the response template title and the school year correctly. So make sure that you select ICRP certification from the response template title and the correct school year, so that when we pull reports, we can capture your submission. And then once we receive district's certification, we will subsequently post the approved certified indirect cost rates on the indirect cost rates webpage and upload individual districts notification letters into GFFC reports and data collections. And that is the last step. Before we go to questions, I will quickly like to go back and do a quick review of the timeline that Kati went over earlier, because it's very important to not miss any deadlines and just keep in mind all these important dates. So the ICRP ACW is already available on our indirect cost rate webpage, and also is accessible through GFFC reports. And the ICRP ACW deadline is January 19th. That's the due date to submit your ACW. And between January and April, we will be reviewing the ICRP ACW and request clarification or resubmission as necessary. And then on April 22 is when we plan to have your completed ICRPs uploaded to GFFC reports. And that will give districts about a month to review their ICRP ACW and submit the certification back to TEA by May 21st, 2021. So this is the due date for the ICRP certification. And then July 1st, 2021, we will upload individual notification letters to GFFC reports and data collection, and also have the rates. The rates are gonna also be available on the indirect cost rate webpage, and then of course they become effective. Now we're gonna open it up for questions and see if there are any questions that were not answered in the Q&A.
Hi, Saida. It looks like Kathy and I have covered all the questions.
Okay, we'll give folks a little bit of time if they can think of questions, or if not, if it's a later time, of course, you can always email us at compliance@tea.texas.gov. One of us will definitely get back to you.
I would like to say one thing. We did get a question about private schools. Remember that this ACW process and the creation of the ICRPs, that's for school districts only, because charter schools get their rates in a different way. The way charter school rates are calculated is we calculate the rates for school districts, and then charter schools, we know from PEEMS what school districts feed into or send students to to each of the charter schools. So our process for charter schools is that we take all of the sending districts and average their calculated rates to get the rate for the charter school. So the charter schools don't have to submit anything. All they have to do is let us know that they want a rate, and then we automatically calculate that rate. We calculate the rates for all charter schools. So, and then we do a survey. We do a survey asking them if they want a rate, and if they indicate yes on that survey, which will be done probably January or February, then we will issue them the average that we've calculated.
I see no other open questions in the Q&A. Trisha?
No, there is not. There's,
Okay.
oh wait, I think one just showed up.
Yeah.
We do receive from the Department of Agriculture for our lunch and breakfast program. Is this different? She's asking about federal subrecipient section. If she receives funds from the Department of Agriculture for lunch and breakfast programs, I guess, should that be included in that section?
If that section is for expenditures, so if she's receiving funds, that's not applicable to go on the subrecipient item.
And that was the only question that wasn't. Oh, if we are paying off a contract in December, will the entire amount be reported? I'm thinking maybe they're talking about terminal leave, but I'm not sure. Julie Maddox, can you let us know which section of the ACW you're referring to? Yes, under terminal leave. Do you want to answer?
It would depend on in what year you're paying off the
Mhm.
contract. So in what year is that expenditure incurred? So right now we're collecting data for 1920. So if that happened in 1920, then yes, you would report it in that year's ACW.
She says if we pay her in December, but we pay off her contract through 2021. So for terminal leave, if it's in the contract, is it reported in that section?
No, it's not.
So
If
then
it's part of, go ahead.
no, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, if it's part of the employee's contract, then it should not be included in terminal leave.
Terminal leave really applies to like unplanned buyouts of someone's contract. You know, sometimes, you know, a superintendent has a contract for multiple years, but then it's not the contract part that you would include there. It would be anything over and above. It's kind of like an incentive or an incentive for someone to leave or something like that. It would be outside of the normal contract.
Mhm.
All right.
And as Saida said, again, if you have other questions, we did have one question in there that in the question box that that I asked the sender to send to the compliance mailbox because I didn't know the answer. So if you have any other questions, be sure to send them to the compliance mailbox and we'll get you a response as soon as possible. Again, a reminder, the ACW is due January the 19th. Okay, thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day and a good week, and we look forward to hearing from you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.